Welcome to Tales by Jin. I'm Jin, and you're listening to the Tales of Lux and Cor Gwyndolyn series. This is Adulthood Part 2, the 8th episode in the series. Sit back, relax, and let yourself be whisked away as we return to the world of Tenebrae to follow Gwyndolyn on her continued adventures in the Dragon Wastes of Cor and beyond.
Gwyn, please. I'll be fine, promise.
Krys said with a chuckle while fending off another fussy claw.
I mean, look at me.
He patted his stomach, and indeed it was much rounder than in the previous weeks. Granted, he still hadn't returned to his childhood rotundness. He was no longer a skeleton with scales on. With sources of food and water secured, vitality returned to Krys in short order. And though he wasn't quite back to full health, he insisted on doing more than just being doted on and cared for.
I can handle a walk to the wild gloomberry patch. If I see anything else worth scavenging on the way, I'll grab it. No, of course not if anyone's around. Yes, I'll stay out of sight. I know. Yes, Gwyn, I know. I don't want to lose you again either, but I'll go crazy if I have to sit around in this hollow any longer.
Gwyn relented, and they touched their foreheads together.
Just be safe, okay? Okay.
They parted, and Krys flashed her a quick smile before trotting off with an empty pack strapped to his back. She waved until he disappeared around the corner, then sighed. She was being overprotective. She knew it. But she also knew Krys wasn't fully recovered from everything since their childhood, much less their first few harrowing weeks on their own. Add to that her intimate understanding of Krys's reluctance to engage in a fight even in self-defense, and, well, she couldn't help but worry. But her worry was her issue. Smothering Krys with it wouldn't help him, rather, it would have the opposite effect. So she let him go with a sigh, and turned her mind to her own development. Today, as usual, she would fill their water skins at the spring she had discovered in a clearing in a thicket growing atop the ridge that housed their hollow. Climbing up the ridge face was still a bit too strenuous for Krys, so she always went alone. This afforded her a bit of privacy that she, admittedly, was somewhat ashamed of needing. She didn't want to hide anything from Krys, but part of her rudimentary agreement with Opal was to keep her existence a secret from everyone. She made sure to indicate that everyone included Krys.
One.
Gwyn reached up and seized the first handhold in the ridge.
2.
She pulled herself up and grabbed the second.
3.
So she continued, counting her way through the Cor numbers with every hand up the ridge. Once she crested, she pointed to the tree. In defiance of its veil-ordained fate, it was showing signs of life post-lightning strike with green shoots sprouting from the charred trunk.
Tree.
Then she palmed one of the shoots, gently guiding one of the leaves closer to her face.
Leaf.
She held the leaf up to an eye and closed the other so that it was all she could see.
Green.
Satisfied, she released the sprout and strolled into the thicket, lost in thought and toying with the unfamiliar sounds of a language that didn't quite fit the kobold vocal structures.
Tree. 3. Tree. 3. Tree. 3. Tree. 3. Tree. 3. Tree. Tree. Fucking 3.
Deep in the thicket, in a small clearing, a spring bubbled forth from a rock formation and spilled down its face to form a pond of clearest water. This had been the source of their drinking water since its discovery, but given its seclusion, it also served a secondary purpose for Gwyn. First, she would fill their skins and set them and her gear aside. Then she would scoop some water to wash with, starting with her feet. Once those were clean, she would enter the shallows of the pond and wash the rest of herself. It had almost become a ritual in itself, the preamble to her secret training. Going through these same motions time after time had a calming effect on her psyche, and as her spirit calmed, the magic began to well within her. With ritualistic precision, Gwyn undid the clasp on her leg pouch and unfurled the twin lengths of silk. They fell into the water as she took care in wrapping them around her forearms and threading them through her fingers. Wet or dry, it mattered not, at least not anymore. But there was a time not long ago where she learned a very quick lesson about water and the conductivity of electricity. Now, however, that conductivity was her weapon to wield. Gwyn raised her arms in the beginning pose of one of her dances, and the silks too rose out of the water and began to undulate around her. As her arms, hips, tail swayed and flowed, so did the silks, even laden with water as they were. Her legs slid through the water, creating gentle ripples instead of rough waves in their wake. The magically charged dance continued, and her mind wandered. In a way, the elders were right. Not in a general sense, but for Gwyndolyn in this specific instance. Her dancing being the means for her to discover and cultivate her magic was all well and good, but she needed to weaponize it. Not as a tool for murder levied against any and all that crossed her path as the elders would have wanted, but as a shield to defend Krys, her clan. She needed to be stronger so that she could protect Krys, so that he would never have to raise a hand in violence ever again, even in self-defense. With these thoughts swirling in her head, the steps in her dance shifted ever so subtly. While still contained in the framework of her dance, a sweeping arm became a swift strike, the twisting electric silk a stinging whip. Every footfall light and bouncy, the prelude to a crushing kick. She spun, dipped, struck, and dodged invisible aggressors as she danced in the shallows, losing herself to the movement, to the magic flowing from her and electrifying the waters around her. Weeks ago, this would have shocked her as well. Now, she was in her element, until a shriek brought her splashing back to reality. The voice was unmistakably kobold. Gwyn listened closer and could hear something crashing through the brush of the thicket. A moment later, a brown kobold burst into the clearing and stumbled face first into the pond. She bolted upright, took one look at the thicket, then scrambled backwards in the water, completely oblivious to Gwyn.
What's going on? Are you all right?
Only then did the brown kobold realize she wasn't alone in the pond. Her gaze snapped up to Gwyn, then back to the clearing. She half crawled, half ran from both.
Wait, I'm not...
Gwyn reached out toward the kobold just as 1, 2, 3 shadow beasts leapt from the thicket into the clearing. The creatures resembled the blackest of panthers, if panthers were comprised of liquid shadow and musculature that seemed to flow over itself, with long, thick tails that started between the shoulders and were as effective as whips in attacking and capturing their prey. Though, as far as Gwyn's knowledge went, they shouldn't be active at this time of day. Strange as that was, there was no time to contemplate it. The kobolds seemed to be running from them, and she was their sole quarry given how they spared one look at Gwyn before resuming pursuit. If there was ever a time to test her new dance, this was it. Gwyn whipped an arm out, and the attached silk shot out towards the nearest shadow beast. On impact, she manipulated the charges in the fabric, causing it to snare the beast's foreleg. She yanked the silk back, and just as it became taut, slammed her foot down on it while simultaneously pulling up. The lightning magic-infused silk did not tear, but instead yanked the shadow beast towards Gwyn as though it were an iron chain. The beast, now hurtling toward Gwyn and unable to change trajectory mid-air, collided with a grayish-blue foot and slammed into the water with such force that it liquefied on impact.
When?
Gwyn whispered to herself as she removed her foot from the puddle of shadow she just created. Displaced water rained down around her as she faced the other two, silks undulating around her.
Next.
The remaining two shadow beasts abandoned their former quarry for this new threat. They charged Gwyn, paws barely disturbing the surface of the water they ran on. On approach, they split from one another to approach from either side of Gwyn. They stopped and crouched low, keeping a measured distance while they studied her. Gwyn looked side to side, keeping an eye on both as best she could. She wasn't aware that shadow beasts could run on water, given how little there was in the wastes. But in a way, it made sense. They were basically beings of pure shadow, and shadows could be cast on anything. All that meant for her now is that they had the movement advantage. She would have to wait for them to come to her. And come they did in a sudden, synchronized assault. They rushed in on both sides, giving Gwyn little time to react. She threw out both silks, but the beast batted them away with their tails. As one, they lunged for her throat and ankles. Gwyn ducked back and kicked off the ground, spinning horizontally in the air as the beast passed over and under her. The silk spun with her, and when she touched down, she had snared the tails of the beasts in them. Now they were attached to her, their movement advantage was lessened somewhat. That didn't change the fact that this was still a 2-on-1 situation. She needed to take out one or both quickly, but without the element of surprise that wouldn't be as easy as the first one. She could try that, but it still wasn't refined. In its current state, she still ran the risk of shocking herself, given the amount of current she had to produce. But she might not have the chance for anything less. These were shadow beasts. All it took was one mistake for her throat to be torn open by jaws of shadow. Growing frustrated with the inability to free their tails from the strange cloth attached to them, the shadow beasts charged again. This time they circled as they did, winding the silk around Gwyn as they closed in. Smart, if these were regular silks and Gwyn was a regular person. But unfortunately for the beasts, she wasn't. She closed her eyes, focused deep in her magical core, and poured out everything she had into the silks. Her muscles seized as that amount of current flowing out affected even her, but that much she expected. What surprised her was the sudden pain in her arms and hands. It wasn't the burning pain of electricity, but the sharp pain of a cut. Many cuts along her forearms and hands. Gwyn opened her eyes as soon as the current subsided enough to allow it. The silks hung straight and stiff in the air, with the shadow beasts dangling limply from them. Okay, good. That was them dealt with. Now about that pain in her arms. She looked down, and sure enough, there was blood trickling down and dripping into the water. The lengths of silk around her forearms and hands had also stiffened to a razor-sharp hardness like the rest and had cut into her. Good to know. She'd have to work that kink out later. For now, breathe, calm down, relax. Let the current ground itself and the silk should loosen. Before they could, though, the shocked and liquefied bodies of the last two shadow beasts slipped from the silks and plopped into the pond. Gwyn couldn't resist a chuckle at the spectacle, and just like that, the overcharged current left her and the silks relaxed. Just to be safe, she plodded over to the bodies and poked them with the silks. Once she was sure they were as dead as shadow beasts got, she too plopped down in the water. Not wanting to stain the silks, she removed them from her bleeding arms and rinsed them in the water before getting up to hang them to dry on a branch by her pack. Only then was she reminded of another presence by a pair of kobold eyes peering at her from a nearby bush.
Right, are you okay?
The kobold's eyes went wide as they realized they had been discovered. The bush rustled as the kobold turned to run.
Hey, I'm not gonna...
The sting in Gwyn's arms proved to be more pressing than a stray kobold. She sat against a tree and rummaged through her pack. Dried meat, berries, her book. Ah, there we are, bandages. She tried as best she could to wrap her arms, but the work was sloppy. The cuts in her hands stung too much to apply the right amount of pressure to the bandages for them to be effective. Ah well. She could go home as she was and have Krys bandage her up when he got back. Sure, she'd get an earful, especially after she was the one fretting over him before they left. But it would be nice to be cared for by him for once. Just the thought alone was enough to dull the stinging in her arms ever so slightly. As she made to tidy up her pack, rustling in the bush next to her caught her attention. The kobold from before, likely. Gwyn put her pack to the side and went back to resting against the tree.
I'm not going to hurt you. You can come out.
A bit more rustling, then the kobold from before stepped out. She had brown scales and eyes of burnt orange. She looked to be about the same age as Gwyn and Krys, if not a bit shorter in stature than the latter.
Are they really dead?
Gwyn shrugged. As dead as a shadow can be.
Oh.
What's your name? The kobold considered for a moment, then sat next to Gwyn.
It doesn't matter. I might as well be dead. I can't go back.
Can't go back?
You don't look like you're from my clan. My clan doesn't take kindly to failed excursions. But how were we supposed to know that there'd be shadow beasts? It was just going to be a day run. They don't usually come out during the day. They told me it would be fine, we just had to...
Whoa, slow down. It's all right. Look, can I ask you a favor?
I guess. My last chance to be useful, huh?
Okay, 2 favors. 1, stop that. I didn't kill 3 shadow beasts for you to consider yourself dead anyway. 2, mind helping me with these? Gwyn raised her arms and nodded toward the bandages.
Oh, right. Yeah, I can help with that.
Reaching over Gwyn, the kobold picked up the bandages and began wrapping. The bubbling of the spring pervaded the silence that hung between them as the kobold worked. Then, Gwyndolyn.
Huh?
My name. It's Gwyndolyn.
Oh, I should thank you, Gwyndolyn, for saving me.
Maybe. Still not gonna tell me your name? The kobold tied the last knot on the bandages unnecessarily tight.
I mean, I'm thankful they didn't kill me, that you saved me, but if I'm dead anyway once I get home, what does a name matter? Why do you care?
Gwyn shook out the arm with the tight knot. I care because it's your name, stupid. Look, I don't know your clan's customs or whatever, but it seems like they are just as stupid as mine. Well, my old one, that is. They would kill you for failing a mission? What a stupid waste of life.
Oh, wait, what do you mean your old one?
Gwyn grinned. Well, you see, I left my old clan because they were stupid and did stupid things. Kind of like yours. So I left with my mate and we started our own clan.
I thought you were a scout.
Well, you're not completely wrong. I might have been, once. This is just where we get our water now. The kobold sat in silence for a moment, staring at her feet from her pulled-up knees. Her claws drummed out a wave pattern in the ground.
Gwyndolyn?
Yes?
Do you think... Is it possible that...
Go on.
If I were to go back, they'd kill me for leaving my dead clanmates behind and not fighting until I was dead along with them. Do you think I could just not go back? And survive without a clan?
Gwyn put a claw to her chin in consideration. Well, I do definitely think going back is stupid. But if there's one thing I have to admit my former clan was right about, it's that a kobold can't survive alone without a clan.
Oh,
so I suppose it can't be helped. Gwyn stood, gathered her pack, and prepared to leave. But before the kobold's expression could get any more dour, she knelt and extended her bandaged paw.
I guess I'll just have to ask you to join our clan.
The kobold's slitted pupils grew wide like saucers as she jumped up and hugged Gwyn. She let go just as quickly, face burning with embarrassment.
Thank you so much. I don't know what to say.
You could say your name for one.
Oh, right. My name is Alexis.
Well then, Alexis. Gwyn grasped her shoulder as firmly as her wounded hand would allow. It won't be official until we get Shaman Krystopher's approval, but for now, welcome to Clan Brightscale.
Gwyndolyn, may I speak with you for a moment?
Gwyn paused mid-gesture and looked from the kobold she was instructing to the voice that had called out to her. She waved her acknowledgement, then turned back to the kobolds with a smile.
Looks like our shaman needs my attention. We'll continue when I get back. For now, practice the forms I taught you last week. And Cyril, remember to focus on and draw from the core of your being as you flow through the motions. Once we get you used to that feeling, you'll be summoning rivers instead of mists in no time. Right, just like that. Don't forget to breathe. Now then, best not keep our shaman waiting.
Gwyn trotted off to the hollow beneath the once more thriving tree overhanging the ridge. At the very back, amongst the clutter their clan had gathered over time as they grew, Krys sat in wait. He was almost as round again as when they were children. The thought filled Gwyn with warmth.
Gwyndolyn, please, come sit.
She did, and touched her forehead to his.
You don't have to be so formal, you know. Not when we're alone anyway, my mate.
Krys nuzzled his forehead against hers, then pulled away.
I know, but what I want to talk about isn't mate to mate, but shaman to elder. I still feel weird being called that. But it's what you are. I'm not.
Gwyn bit her words short and shifted herself so she could look out towards the mouth of the hollow. Alexis, Cyril, Miriam, Alistair, Quentin, they all looked up to her and Krys as the leaders of this clan of lost or discarded hatchlings. Of course, Krys being the de facto shaman made sense. Not only was he descendant of one, he was being trained to succeed her before they left. But her? An elder? 3 of the kobolds that had joined them were older than her. What business did she have calling herself their elder? She was still too young, still too much she didn't know. Questions she couldn't answer, fears and worries she couldn't allay.
Gwyn.
She felt the spongy softness of Krys's plump paw slide down her arm until his claws intertwined with hers.
You're not my grandmother. You're not her elder council.
I know.
You're not going to become them by sharing a title.
I know, but...
But?
She sighed. They'd had this exchange many times before, with varying degrees of volatility on her end. She knew he was right, but...
You're not them, Gwyn. You won't become them. Just like I won't become her because I'm a shaman for a clan now.
Krys gave her claw a squeeze as he rested his head on her shoulder.
You're teaching us to dance, to lead a more peaceful life than the ones we came from, to manifest our magic in ways that can be beautiful, if we want, instead of as tools for destruction. If we've learned anything since we've left, it's that wisdom doesn't always come with age. I know it. They know it. You know it. That's why I'm their shaman, and you're my elder. And right now, I need my elder's counsel.
Gwyn leaned her head on his shoulder and squeezed back.
All right, fine. What do you require of your elder, oh most esteemed shaman of the Brightscale clan?
Krys sat up and coughed to smother a laugh.
Right, to business then. So, as you are aware, our clan has been expanding.
Well, yeah, but we've still got space for a couple new additions. If we move some of these spoils over there, and then that stuff there could go...
No, I mean...
Color rose to Krys's cheeks, tinting his pale purple scales dark. Oh.
Yeah,
Who?
Alexis and Quentin.
Those two? No wonder they kept requesting to go scavenge together. If that was what Alexis was after, she could have just asked us to use the hollow. A lot safer than some random bush out who knows where.
Gwyn,
What?
are you really suggesting that two clanmates ask their shaman and elder if they can do that in the shaman's quarters?
I suppose that is a big ask.
You suppose?
To be fair, though, it's not like we're fucking in here. If they want to mate, we can just let...
Gwyndolyn!
At this point, Krys was as vivid purple as a morning glory blossom. His grip on her claw was vice-like. She couldn't help but grin at his discomfort.
I don't think they need a private place to mate,
He managed to say after a few deep breaths.
Alexis wanted to know, when the time comes, where to lay.
Ah, right.
In her old clan, all eggs are laid in a communal laying pit and cared for by designated tenders.
A lot better than our old clan's stupid system for starters.
Maybe, but as I don't really have the capability of laying eggs myself, I didn't feel comfortable making a decision on the spot for every egg layer in this clan without at least consulting with my elder.
Smart.
So, what do you think?
Gwyn took a moment to look around their cluttered hollow. True, there might be room for another adult or two to join their clan, but maybe not for a clutch to be laid and cared for. And certainly not space enough for a laying pit, if she seriously wanted to consider that. And she wasn't. However, despite it not really being an issue until this moment, she had given serious thought to what sort of situation she'd want for her clan's eggs and hatchlings. None of that stupid laying in dangerous places to sort out weak and strong eggs. And an impersonal pit didn't seem like the best alternative either. While she was robbed of experiencing a family of her own, family was something Krys cherished. So she wanted to cultivate that connecting aspect of family that Krys held so dear, while preventing the isolation that allowed his family to become as twisted and abusive as it did. She would have to finally confide in Krys about her friend. Krys?
Yes, Gwyn?
Don't get mad, but there's something I've been hiding from you.
I know.
When we first found this place, there was this visitor that brought us food and water, and well, I caught them and made them teach me things, and well, that sounds more aggressive than it was, but they made me promise not to wait, what do you mean you know?
I guess I didn't really know, but I had my suspicions something was going on. You're a terrible liar.
No, I'm not. I'm totally great at lying. That wouldn't be something worth bragging about, actually. Now Krys got a turn to grin at his flustered mate.
No, I don't think so.
Why didn't you say anything?
I trust you, because I love you. I figured if it was something you wanted to keep not just from them, but me as well, it must be something really important. And it didn't seem to be hurting you, so I figured you'd tell me when you felt it was time. I take it it's time?
Gwyn buried her snout between her knees and muttered something unintelligible.
I'm sorry, what was that? I couldn't quite hear with all that leg in the way.
I said I love you too, you stupid purple heart melter. Anyway, yes, I can't really say much. From what I can understand, they're worried that if more kobolds find out about them, that they won't be as understanding as me, and will attack on sight. Which, fair. So they requested I keep them a secret. I'm telling you this much and no more now, because it will make explaining this next thing easier. Claw and claw. Gwyn stood and walked Krys to the back wall of the hollow. She felt along the stone until a claw slipped into an indent and pointed out the spot to Krys. Okay, so, if I understood correctly, they said to push here, and this wall will collapse in. And beyond is a cave network that's closed off from the outside world except for here, and a small opening near the spring where we get our water. I don't know how big it is, but I think this might be the solution to our growth problem. What do you think, Shaman?
Did your friend discover this cave network for us?
To be honest, well, I shouldn't betray their trust. But I will be thanking them profusely the next time I see them.
Thank them for me on behalf of the clan as well.
I always do.
Well then, shall we?
With a nod from Gwyn, Krys lifted his free claw to the wall. A small purple crystal formed in the indent and began to increase in size. As it did, he eased his claw forward and the crystal followed suit, pressing into the wall. With an echoing crack, the wall shattered and fell harmlessly as a shower of jagged pebbles at their feet. The dark expanse of cave gaped beyond, stretching deep enough that even with their cobalt eyesight, they could not see all the way to the end.
This will definitely do,
Krys said, as he continued to stare into the depths. I thought so. As for where to lay, well, laying mates can have a hollow down here all to themselves to lay and care for their eggs. No pit, no leaving them to the elements. 1 egg, 100 eggs, doesn't matter. We'll care for them all together. Krys took Gwyn's other claw in his and held them both tight as he touched his forehead to hers. He nuzzled his head against hers as their tails entwined.
That we will, my elder, my mate, my love. That we will.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Tales of Lux and Cor, Gwyndolyn. If you liked what you've heard, please be sure to like the video and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to make sure you're notified when new episodes come out. Thanks for stopping by, and may your cave be ever warm.